most of the prevailing needs to relax, to have fun, to behave and consume in accordance with the advertisements, to love and hate what others love and hate, belong to this category of false needs. Such needs have a societal content and function, which are determined by external powers over which the individual has no control. The development and satisfaction of these needs is heteronomous. No matter how much such needs may have become the individual's own, reproduced and fortified by the conditions of his existence, no matter how much he identifies with them and finds himself in their satisfaction, they continue to be what they were from the beginning, products of a society whose dominant interest demands repression. In 1964, Frankfurt School critical theorist Herbert Marcuse published his best-known work, One-Dimensional Man. If you get a chance to read the book, you'll find it to be a striking relic of a bygone left, set apart from and unconstrained by the dogmas which it has come to generate in the 21st century. Some of its most striking and significant realizations have become watered down, shallow platitudes, but from Marcuse himself, yet unmuddied through decades of mediocre doctrine building, this book remains provocative in all the best ways. I think we might be better served by reading the Frankfurt School and engaging with their ideas, some of which have not stood the test of time, many of which have been bastardized almost beyond recognition by cliché slogans and over-eager college students, and some of which were remarkably prescient. Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man, I think, is one of these striking ideas by which the modern bourgeois, both liberal and conservative, is ruthlessly indicted. One of the more liberal bourgeois concepts anticipated by Marcuse's insight is the modern truism, representation matters. Even many liberals will receive this slogan with an eye roll, tired of the self-serious attitude it all too often embodies. But there are still some who enthusiastically and sincerely defend it, and I came across one such man who goes by the name LegalKimchi.
When someone with the authority of a teacher, say, describes the world and you're not in it, there's a moment of psychic disequilibrium, as if you looked in a mirror and saw nothing.
A common statement is that we're past the age where representation matters. The paper cited previously about poverty and race was published in 2001, a little over 20 years ago. Uhura was on Star Trek in 1966. That's almost 60 years ago. It's important in the 60s. It was important 20 years ago, and considering that Fox News ran stories about how character was what elevated people from poverty, we can see that the message is still the same. Complete nuanced representation means just like people needed to see in 1966. We could be seen as we should be seen every day.
LegalKimchi starts off his video by pointing out the Moorish and Turkish warriors of European fable.
There's a treasure trove of POC in Western media, and it's from Arthurian legend. In the story of Sir Parsifal from Wolfram von Eschenbach's epic poem Parsifal, it is told Parsifal's half-brother Fierifis is mixed race. Yay! Being of both Angevin or English descent through his father and black African descent from his mother, Queen Belkane. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Clearly this guy is just a knight with black armor. It's a common motif of the age. However, the text of the poem disagrees. His mother is described of having skin as black as night. Fierifis is described of having skin like a magpie. Then there's the story of Sir Morian. He's the brother of Percival, who's born of an English father and a Moorish mother. Wait, this is from the Middle Dutch Lancelot Compliance. Okay, Europeans just find a trope and they go with it. Now, he's described as being, quote, all black, even as I tell ye. His head, his body, and his hands were all black, saving only his teeth. His shield and his armor were even those of a Moor, and black as a raven. Sir Gawain and the Turk, which is basically the same story as Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, except the Green Knight is Turkish. These characters appeared in Le Morte d'Arthur, which was published in 1485 by Thomas Malory.
It's kind of funny because even through his examples, we see that this medieval representation of blacks and Moors is through the lens of the exotic and foreign. It's as exotic as a Green Knight. It's a sign of the power of the Round Table that they attracted warriors even from such strange and distant lands as Turks and Saracens. This representation is not of the nature LegalKimchi actually wants in the present day.
Now, this portrayal of Morian is a bit problematic by modern standards. He's described as being uncouth and aggressive. Kathy Darrop writes, Morian's blackness, like his aggressive behavior and menacing speech, is fearsome to the other characters. He is perceived as bestial and violent.
These characters, with their strange manners and complexions, in essence, actually indicate the opposite of what LegalKimchi is trying to say, being included precisely because they are so bizarre and fun for a medieval Anglo or Germanic audience. The superficiality of his argument is in fact so obvious that it serves us to illustrate an important point. LegalKimchi is very firmly fixed in the notion that representation must be defended at all costs. This conversation is no longer a literary, media, or historical one, which can be considered in something sort of akin to objectively. It is for him a fundamentally political conversation, and he occupies a side in it that he must construct arguments, however stretched, to defend. He will therefore engage with this issue and the consumable media products he perceives as on his side, not according to taste or historical accuracy, but according to ideology. And according to Marcuse, this is completely by design. The people recognize themselves in their commodities. They find their soul in their automobile, hi-fi set, split-level home, kitchen equipment. The very mechanism which ties the individual to his society has changed, and social control is anchored in the new needs which it has produced. But even Marcuse, I think, could not have imagined how literally true these words would become. LegalKimchi literally wants to see himself in his media commodities, a need told to him by the very media companies which produce it, a new artificial need only they can satisfy. That much is a tale as old as time. But there is a new and terrible twist to this version of consumable. If it can attach to the host, if it can attach to something stronger than his comfort, it can feed forever, because it taps into an infinite resource contained inside of every consumer. Entertainment may become dull, stomachs become full, but a sense of righteous purpose is inexhaustible. Look how sincerely he does marketing for this show.
So there was this moment where my spouse and I were watching the pilot episode of the Disney animated show The Owl House, where the main character's mother says,
"And what were you going to do with this?"
That was for the Act 3 closer.
Mija, I love your creativity, but it's gotten out of hand.
And I looked over, and my spouse's eyes lit up as she said to me, "Wait, she's a nerdy, bookish Latina? She's me." She is a grown, successful, and confident woman. She's incredibly capable and deals with pressures and stress throughout the day that most people can't even comprehend.
Free of charge. And he's thanking them, all because he thinks he's doing the politically righteous thing. But the true politics, what's actually happening here, is exposed by Marcuse. Technological rationality reveals its political character as it becomes the great vehicle of better domination, creating a truly totalitarian universe in which society and nature, mind and body, are kept in a state of permanent mobilization for the defense of this universe. I love that Marcuse uses the word mobilization. It's so evocative of the ideological capture of this consumer by Warner Brothers or whatever other media conglomerate. LegalKimchi thinks he's defending some imaginary brown nerd girl or his wife or some other identity politics sacred cow, while the true political lines lie beneath. He may incidentally be defending wheelchair-bound Latinas in tech, but really, how it counts, he's defending Warner Brothers. LegalKimchi is engaged in politics, and he imagines liberal politics against those grouchy conservative racists. But more significant than the surface politics are the dollars and cents. He may be protesting the conservative white racists, but he's not protesting or seemingly even considering those dollars and cents. And according to Marcuse, this method of perception is a diversionary tactic. Such modes of protest and transcendence are no longer contradictory to the status quo and no longer negative. They are rather the ceremonial part of practical behaviorism, It's harmless negation and are quickly digested by the status quo as part of a healthy diet. If companies can get you to attach your identities to them, but further to perceive your ethical or moral dimensions as contingent upon their actions, that by fulfilling these created moral needs, they can then inspire the deepest type of loyalty, moral loyalty. And in this, they succeed in creating a truly one-dimensional man, the man whose ethical considerations happen upon the dimension of consumption, the man who will defend on his honor the one-dimensional society in which the inner dimension of the mind, in which opposition to the status quo can take root, is whittled down. The loss of this dimension, in which the power of negative thinking, the critical power of reason, is at home, is the ideological counterpart to the very material process in which advanced industrial society silences and reconciles the opposition. LegalKimchi may have gotten his nerdy Latina, but never thought to ask what the corporations want in exchange. His money, certainly, but more than just his money, they want him to identify his personhood with them. They want him to love them and defend him with the same sense of urgency as if he were defending himself. Representation is cheap. Throw skin change on a mermaid for all they care. It costs them nothing, and in return is loyalty deeper than money can buy, although they get plenty of that too, of course. What they want in exchange is
your voice.
The idea of inner freedom here has its reality. It designates the private space in which man may become and remain himself. Today, this private space has been invaded and whittled down by technological reality. Mass production and mass distribution claim the entire individual, and industrial psychology has long since ceased to be confined to the factory. The manifold processes of introjection seem to be ossified in almost mechanical reactions. The most predictable consumer is the true believer. It's a hell of a gamble to make, but some, like this man, buy it. Hook, line, and sinker.
Viacom CBS ran a survey in 2021 worldwide to look into this issue. Only about half the people surveyed were satisfied with their representation in media. 79% said that there needs to be more diversity seen on the screens. And calls for diversity came from 80% of people who considered themselves to be underrepresented.
Middle Eastern and Arabic people and black people feel they are portrayed as criminals. Middle Eastern and Arabic people and indigenous people feel that they're portrayed as angry. Middle Eastern and Arabic people and black people feel that they are portrayed as dangerous. Nearly 60% of those who feel poorly represented say it makes them feel unimportant, ignored, or disappointed. Among those who feel poorly represented, the top 3 areas that a lack of representation impacts are self-esteem and confidence, sense of belonging, and opportunities.
This is a really funny one to me because most Arabs I've met over the years have the preemptive comment when you first meet them that not all Muslims and Arabs are terrorists, and they feel very insecure because I think that Hollywood is a genuine reflection of reality. I really hate that their default assumption of Americans is that we're one-dimensional, although I can hardly blame them at this point, but their anxiety is based on representation that's not tuned to their liking, and on the critique goes until the end of time, as Hollywood chases its own tail, shaping and then trying to fit the acceptable standard of what is considered sensitive or good representation. Black women ought to be portrayed as strong, until that's actually a harmful trope, and they need to be vulnerable, but not morally vulnerable, just emotionally vulnerable. Actually, never mind, they can be badass villains too, but not too often, or else what will little black girls think of themselves? It turns into an unsolvable mess, as trendy attitudes come and go. Barbie was out, then it was in again, then out, and now it's in again, and it's probably going to be out again soon.
Think about disabled characters in the media that you know. For the most part, it appears to me that they either have superpowers or they're defined solely by their disability. It's a showcase of their courage under adversity. Now, there's a term that some disability advocates use for it.
If you want representation to matter like that, you're signing yourself up for an emotional roller coaster. If you attach your identity to the media, you're attaching it to the vicissitudes and fickleness of the media's nature, to the collective consensus amongst the people who matter in business and what they think the most advantageous version of your identity is that day. It's a pretty risky and unstable way to perceive your identity. But one-dimensional men will do it, and one constant is the dollars in his one-dimensional pocket as he continues to critique, praise, and most importantly, consume according to the moral paradigm that he knows.
So companies are seeing through their own research that audiences want more diversity globally, not just in racially or ethnically, but economically, religiously, and even dialect and accent-wise. I know I am talking about representation through the lens of race and ethnicity, but that's not the entire scope. Disability, sexual orientation, gender, economic status, religion. There's so many types of representation, and they're all part of it.
So I'm going to accept the findings of this research for the sake of argument, although I think that research which so easily conforms to a narrative should be subject to greater scrutiny. If the findings are true, this is certainly a problem, although not in the way that he's putting it. And I will say too, I think a lot of people in America do struggle with a sense of identity. For instance, I was raised in a subculture for which there was basically no representation in media. Homeschoolers. And this was in the 2000s, where the best we got was,
"You're a homeschooled jungle freak who's a less hot version of me." Yeah.
and I wasn't even allowed to watch that movie anyway. But I was very bothered when I was a kid because I did feel this difference between myself and my peers, and that did sting. But as I grew up, I kind of got over it because I realized that I don't get my sense of identity from my peers or what they know or don't know about me or even the all-powerful Disney Corp. As much as they may try to sink their talons in, our identities do not spring from the products we consume. If we say representation matters, many people focus all of their attention on the representation, but the far more important part is the matters. How much weight should we give a corporation to tell us if we are valid or not? Must we wait for their stamp of approval to feel comfortable in ourselves and in our culture, in our individual personalities if we're a nerdy Latina? If we are not represented at all, does that mean that we are erased? If we are to believe LegalKimchi, perhaps yes, it does. This is the condition of the one-dimensional life. The one-dimensional man sacrifices his complexity to people who only know him by the money he can pay. This is dehumanizing, but he dehumanizes himself and thanks the exploiter, begging for more. He preaches to the non-believers with fervor and ferocity that we must see ourselves in Cadillacs and Christmas specials, and in this way the one-dimensional men spread and perpetuate the one-dimensional society through their presumptions. The efficiency of the system blunts the individual's recognition that it contains no facts which do not communicate the repressive power of the whole. If the individuals find themselves in the things which shape their life, they do so not by giving, but by accepting the law of things, not the law of physics, but the law of their society. There's nothing wrong with enjoying movies or products or whatever you want. The poison is the ideological identification with them, the moral attachment to them, and the one-dimensional life that follows. Because what does it profit a man to see one neurodivergent Native Alaskan on a TV show if he loses his whole soul?